Between the two of them.
The inside of Coates.
Parker gets too heavily involved.
And that's Whitehead and Coates.
Welcome, one and all, to VRRC's round 2 of their NASCAR special event. We're at the Auto Club Speedway this afternoon, or this evening, I should say, actually, and it is looking rather miraculous there in the background, isn't it? We had Daytona last week, and of course, we've got Bristol in a week's time, but we land slap bang in the middle of that graphic at Auto Club, previously known as the California Speedway, apparently, which to me, I think sounds a little bit better, but here we are. I can't make the rules. I am joined by Lewis Edwards. I was about to say as per usual because that's my normal go-to, but actually, Lewis, you're not our usual co-commentator, but you are in it for these 3 weeks. How was it last week, and are you looking forward to this one?
Yeah, last week was chaotic, to say the least. Organised chaos, shall we say. There was lots of action throughout the field. Any driver could have come away with the win, and in the end it was the HFT boys that made it to the front. But I think this week we're going to see more strategy and a bit more difference in the way drivers approach the corners, as it's not quite flat out, so there are certain different ways you can go at the corners, and definitely different things you can do on strategy. I'm excited to see what people are going to do this week.
Yeah, and of course we do have a third member of our commentary in the commentary booth, a voice that people will actually probably be more familiar with than Lewis is. It's Andy McEwan. Andy, how was judging us and our NASCAR knowledge last week? And you look pretty quick as well today.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I am still living the dream. I get to come to work on a Wednesday night and, as much as I enjoy sitting in the virtual commentary box alongside you, Jack, and talking about the racing, it's nice to get stuck in every now and again. And I think it's fair to say I got stuck in last week at Daytona, hoping for a slightly less incident-filled night tonight. But, really excited.
Yeah, I was going to say, without giving too much away of the practice, or last week, it didn't go quite so well for you, but you're looking like you've solved some issues, shall we say, this week. I'm guessing you're very excited for this one. How much testing has been going on in the background for you and everybody else in the server?
Yeah, quite a lot, actually. I think that's one thing people have realised about NASCAR in general. You need to practice it. It is a completely different skill set than your circuit racing, road course racing that most of the drivers are used to. But also this track in particular is a challenge. It's not like Daytona. It's half a mile shorter. It's a lot flatter. There's a lot less grip. And therefore, you really have to drive the cars around this place. Whereas at Daytona, you keep that right foot pinned and turn left every now and again. So I think everyone's realised they need some more practice. And I'm hoping that that's going to result in a higher quality race for everyone tonight.
You make it sound so easy to drive Daytona. Just keep it pinned and turn left. But we do know that some drivers do it better than others. And we've already heard Lewis mention a few of them, but we can reveal the top 3 from last week. Lewis already said that it was a pretty chaotic evening. But on top came Kyle Felvers, his HFT teammate Nicky Taylor, which we alluded to before, came second. And then Josh Martin came home in third. And some fancy new graphics as well. I'm quite a fan of that podium style graphic, and that is how the top 3 were. That means we can lead ourselves onto the championship, and there's no surprise. We do only do one race per evening here, so whoever comes first in that race will be top of the championship, i.e. Kyle Felvers, with 25 points. Nicky Taylor's 3 points behind. Josh Martin's 5 points behind. And then you have the rest of the top 10. Elliot Dalton-Ayres, Joel Lask, Andy McEwan, as we've just spoken about before. We'll get on to how his evening went in a little bit more detail in a couple of minutes' time. Reese Bell, John Jones, Oliver Gibson, and Paul Laramie all took to the field of Daytona. And Lewis, just like Andy said then, I think a lot of people were almost taken by surprise with how different NASCAR is and how you do have to take it quite seriously.
Yeah, I think most people jumped in assuming that Daytona is completely flat out and occasionally you turn left sometimes, as Andy said. They assumed it would be a walk in the park to get used to, but I think people were quite surprised by actually how difficult it was to race with other people 3 wide. It's definitely something, when we were doing our practice sessions, we were all surprised by how much you have to concentrate to not spear into the side of somebody when you're 3 wide going around the banking. I think it took people a little bit of time to get used to it in the race itself, but I think towards the end, people were beginning to get the hang of it. And we've had a bit of a practice race on our Monday evening, and I think that's definitely going to have helped the drivers keep it nice and clean, but also provide us with a good show.
Yes, we've been reliably informed that the racing was fantastic, to be honest, on a Monday night. So we're hoping that translates into a Wednesday night, because otherwise it's going to be a little bit disappointing, isn't it? Given that we weren't even broadcasting the Monday. But just like Andy said, that hopefully will mean some more consistent racing as well. Right, we're going into qualifying, and I do believe we can show you some live pictures. There we go. And top of the timing, we're not going to, well, we are going to distract him because, to be honest, being 2/10 up the road is just absolutely criminal. Andy, how on earth are you getting this time out of this car? This is absolutely ballistic. I'm not trying to belittle you, but you're going against some properly quick drivers out there.
No one is more surprised than I, Jack, I can assure you. Look, full disclosure, this is probably my favourite NASCAR track to drive. I adore Auto Club. It really suits my driving style. I'm also not carrying any compensation weight. I'm sure that's having a small effect too. But yeah, it's just a real pleasure to drive this place. And when you get into the rhythm and when you sort of crack the code as to how to get around here quickly, the driver can actually make some time up. It's not like Daytona where you are just flat out around the whole track, at least when you're on your own. Here, you've got to lift, you've got to turn in at a certain point, you're picking the throttle up at a certain point as well. I've got to dive into the pits here for some fuel, guys, but when I'm fully fueled up, I'll take you on a lap around the place and perhaps try and show you how it's done.
Yeah, I was going to say, we did want to go on a lap with you at Daytona. We didn't quite make it work, did we? But as you lock the brakes up rather dramatically and have someone almost barreling into the back of you, we'll let you get your strategy done and dusted. But Lewis, this does promise to be a completely different race, doesn't it, to Daytona? There's a lot of slipstreaming involved, but there's a lot more tactics. There's a bit more tyre scrubbing. And as we see that, it's a ridiculously wide circuit, but there is sort of only really one ultimate line to go through. And that's going to cause some problems and headaches, I imagine, for a few drivers.
Yeah, one thing Andy was telling us pre-broadcast was in real life, they can run quite high and still carry that same speed round the overall lap. They can run in more than one lane. But on this mod, we found that it's definitely more beneficial to run down by the white line all the way around all of the corners, which is not usual to NASCAR. Normally you can run high and it still be as quick around the lap, so it does make overtaking a little more difficult. I think the main difference being the lack of banking, which means that the cars do have to lift. You can't go completely flat out like you can at Daytona, thanks to the ridiculously high banking. Here you do have to lift, and you may choose to tap the brakes. It adds another little dimension that wasn't quite there last week, but especially with the slipstream, you do have to get the car slowed down. And it's at what point do you do that? How much do you want to slow down? How do you get back to the power? What line do you take? All of those little elements we didn't have last week, but we are going to enjoy this week. So I'm really looking forward to it. And it seems that our co-commentator Andy has it mastered at the moment.
Yes, he does for the time being. We'll jump on board now. He's got his all fuel and everything. But for anybody out there who's a bit geeky, like Andy, about the different sort of degrees of banking and everything like that between the different circuits, we'll be speaking about it quite a lot, I imagine. Well, Daytona is 31 degrees banking on their turns. Not necessarily on the back stretch or anything like that, but on their turns for sure. Whereas here at Auto Club, it's only 14, so it's less than half the banking. So basically, gravity is doing less than half the work for you, effectively, which is why the driver is so much more important. Right, Andy, we're currently on board with you. You're following a few drivers. You've got a couple of drivers behind you as well. Is there any sort of buffering? Is there anything you can talk us through as you go through a lap?
Yeah, I'll take you around a lap if you like. Coming across the line now, speed about 190 miles an hour at the line. You're getting very close to 200 going into turn one. Turn in very early. You've got to get down to the bottom of the track. Like Lewis was saying, the top of the track just doesn't have the grip on this version of Auto Club. And you want to be out of that throttle for as little time as possible. Really focus on getting onto it as soon as you can, because the long back straight is where you've got to carry all of that momentum. Down into turn 3 and 4, slightly different set of corners. Slightly more open on the entry, but it does really tighten through the centre, but then it really opens up on exit. You come right up against the wall here. You can see the cars ahead staying down low. That's scrubbing loads of speed off. You want to open up the steering, right up against the wall, and that is how to do, in theory, a reasonably quick lap. Now, what I'm going to try and demonstrate now is how to pass around here, because that is going to be hard to do. The outside line is not that grippy. You can see the time I lose going into the corner by going up high. But in theory, if I've done this right, I'll get a nice run off the top of the banking, sit in the draft down the back straight, and close right in into turn number 3. That, I think, is going to be the key to making ground up here tonight, is trying not to follow in the wheel tracks like this. I'm losing so much air off the nose of the car by going into the corner like that, and you can see I just can't get back to the throttle where I want to. So moving around the track, getting that run onto the straights, and utilising that really powerful draft, that's how you're going to be passing people here tonight.
Yeah, a lap ago you said that that's a lap in theory of how to do it properly. You do know you were 2/10 quicker on the lap that you showed us then than your original pole time. Did you know that? I feel like you knew that because that looked absolutely rapid, and now you're almost 3/10 to the good of Oliver Gibson, and you did just demonstrate us how to get around people as well. You said in your notes that you sent to us, because everybody, ladies and gentlemen, Andy did send us copious amount of notes about Auto Club. He likes the circuit that much. And then it's 75 feet wide or something, this track, and we can see it visually out on circuit. Does that mean we're going to be able to get, even though it's quite slow to go on that high line, does that mean we're going to get a variety of overtakes? It's almost a bit more like track racing.
Yeah, I hope so. Certainly it gives you options. Even if that outside lane isn't quite as quick as the bottom of the racetrack, that is a car pointing the wrong way, and it's not me for a change. Yeah, even though the outside line is not as grippy as you might like, you've got somewhere to go. So if you are behind someone who is a little bit off your pace, you probably can go to the outside of them if on the start or restart there's a bit of a stack up going into the corner, you've got places to go. And if you get that massive slipstream down the straight, but you've got two cars side by side in front of you, you can easily go to the inside or outside of them. So it just gives you more options than you've had at Daytona, where really, you know, if you come up against cars going side by side, you just kind of have to sit in behind them and perhaps push them along a bit. So, yeah, we'll wait and see how competitive that outside line is, but it's certainly nice to know that it's there if you need it.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, Lewis, we've been speaking quite a lot about this track. We've got 4 minutes of qualifying left. I'll bring us down the top 10, and then going to ask you a couple of technical questions about how to, about when sort of technical terms that we'll be using throughout the evening. Like we've already used the term mod quite a lot this evening. We'll just try and get to the grips of what that actually means for those out there who don't know. But yeah, running down the top 10, Andy McEwan at the pole position, who's spoken to Oliver Gibson. Second place, 3/10 down the road. That is a monumental margin in NASCAR. Rich Hayden is in third, only a couple of hundredths behind. That's more like what we used to see. Paolo Tempera is in fourth. Paul Laramie is in fifth. Simon Thorpe in sixth. Seventh, Elliot Dolphins. Eric Axelson currently in eighth place. Carl Felvis, our Daytona winner, is just inside the top 10 in ninth. And then Josh Martin, who came third at Daytona, is in the top 10 only by a whisker. Well, by 7,000ths of a second ahead of Nicky Taylor, who's in 11th place. So that is, well, your top 11 for you, as Josh Martin's in the pits, Andy's in the pits, and Rich Hayden is in the pits as well. But everybody else is still out there rotating. Right, Lewis, I said we were going to be talking a little bit technical now, breaking down some of the definitions of the terms we've been using. But when we say that this is a grippy mod, or it's a slightly different mod, or it's an earlier, or it's a slightly older mod, what does that exactly mean to sort of, in layman's terms, those who don't know at home?
So we'll start with the base game tracks. So Assetto Corsa laser scanned a bunch of tracks when they released the game, and there's about 20 or 30 of them. But they enabled mod support. Now, a mod is where somebody from the community, or it might be a company or a group of people, decide, we like these 30 tracks, but there's this one that they haven't done, and we would like to play that in the game. And that is what somebody has done for Auto Club. They've decided, we want to race Auto Club in Assetto Corsa. So they've made the track, the model of the track, and then gone through the process of adding things like the AI, the racing line, track cameras, all of that sort of add-on bits in the editor that Assetto Corsa provide. And then here we are. That is a track mod. It is the same principle for cars. If somebody wants to drive a NASCAR, the people at Race Sim Studio decided that they would like to plow loads of resources into making a really good NASCAR mod. So that's what they did. It's modeled really accurately. It's got great sound and really well done physics. They've put that all together and they sell it for about £3 on the internet. And then here we are. Just combine the two and we have a nice car mod, and we have a nice track mod.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously we go in, we download those mods, don't we, when we sort of make a server out of it. So without going into depth of how it all works, it's, Rich, basically, from VRRC, he sort of sets the server up, he downloads the mod, everybody downloads the mod as well, so they can access the server, and that means they can go out there and drive in the car, they can drive on the track, but they could put the Nascar on at Silverstone or something like that, couldn't they? So there's, we're not going to race like that, but you could, in theory, do it like that. It's, completely viable for you.
Yeah, it absolutely is. To borrow and paraphrase Enzo Ferrari, if you can dream it, somebody's probably made an Assetto Corsa mod for it.
That's pretty good paraphrasing. I think, yeah, he probably foresaw that coming in the future. With 25 seconds left to go then, Andy is still on top. He's still in the pit lane as well. Oliver Gibson going around, but doesn't look like he's able to go quicker on that particular lap. And I think without the slipstream, it's going to be difficult to jump up that one position he's so desperate to do. But I have to say, Oliver Gibson, Lewis, is doing exceptionally well, isn't he? We didn't see the best of him, I don't feel, in the touring cars that we just had in the last championship. But here in the Nascar, maybe he's starting to stitch it together.
Yeah, we saw little glimpses throughout the season of what he was capable of. I remember that pole position at Norris Ring out of absolutely nowhere, when he really hooked up the lap, and even he didn't know how he'd managed it. But we've seen glimpses across the VRRC, sometimes in the time attack as well, of what he's capable of, and I think this track and this car is really suiting his style quite well. Obviously, Andy's got a wealth of experience in NASCAR, so that explains why he's at the top, and he's not carrying any success ballast, and it's the same, I believe, for Oliver Gibson, or it might be very minimal ballast that he's carrying. I think that's definitely helping. There are a lot of names towards the top who aren't carrying that ballast.
I was going to say, Andy, I don't want to bring you down or sort of claim that you're not doing an upstanding job here, but that ballast, do you think there is something in that?
I think there is, and you can tell that actually during the practice that we've done when you go out with different levels of fuel on. So for qualifying there, I was putting 20 litres of fuel in. That's enough to do about 10 laps or so. And the car just feels that bit more manoeuvrable, bit more nimble with low fuel than when you put 70 litres in for a race run. And obviously that's because the fuel is adding a significant amount of weight to the car. So yeah, add weight to a car, it will slow it down. It slows down the acceleration, the braking, but around here, it just makes it feel a bit more lethargic through those long corners where you're relying on things like aerodynamic and mechanical grip because you don't have the banking to support you. So a week ago at Daytona, you could have put any amount of ballast in the car you liked. It wouldn't have made a difference. But here at Auto Club, I think it is probably having an effect.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Right, we'll have a bit more of a chat to you after this short advert, Andy. But good luck and get ready for the race.
Thanks, guys.
And we are back in the room. We've had to let Andy go, so we won't be having a pole position interview. But to be fair, Lewis, I think we've probably spoken to Andy a fair bit over the last 10 minutes, isn't it? It's amazing to do those sort of, well, you do the track guide every single week for the touring cars and our main championships, don't we? But to have that sort of live feel whilst doing the track guide is quite nice to see. And it adds something a little bit different, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the main thing that we really benefited from, easy to say, was when he demonstrated how you set up a move. I think that's something that is going to be really necessary for the drivers to figure out if that one specific line you have to run is really the only line that works. Setting up a move to make sure you're the car on that line and you're just ahead is really important. So it was really good to see Andy showing us that in qualifying.
Yeah, and you've already mentioned the fact that all these drivers had a practice run. Well, not all of them, but a lot of them. I think we had 9 people turn up on Monday for a practice race. A lot of them, that'll be really good experience, because what you don't get in NASCAR quite a lot, you can jump on a server and you can rotate 200 laps around a NASCAR circuit without really feeling it. Get your setup okay, with the tire pressures or whatever. You can get into the rhythm of it, but as soon as you add other drivers around you with slipstreaming, with just battles and everything like that, 200 miles an hour, it's a completely different kettle of fish, isn't it? And I think that's what surprised people last week.
Yeah, definitely. I think because the cars, they are quite heavy and they do feel as heavy as they actually are. And the consequences for very small errors are so large. I think that's why it kind of amplifies what we see in the touring cars, because with the front wheel drive touring cars, they can support quite a lot of door banging, as you see in real world. You can lean on the other drivers quite a lot, but if you lean on the other driver in this and they just get a tiny snap of oversteer, potentially you're both going to be launched into the sky, and that's going to be your race done. We have reduced the damage to 50%, I believe, but even still, that's going to put you quite a long way back, and you are going to need some luck from a caution.
Absolutely, because I think we noted after the broadcast while we were discussing things, sort of wondering about what's going to happen this week and everything like that, that we sort of noted that unlike other platforms, shall we say, this is Assetto Corsa, of course, but maybe unlike iRacing, the door-to-door contact is a little bit more stressful on the car, shall we say. So if there's a little bit of door banging or something, the cars sort of bounce off each other a little bit more. But then in Assetto Corsa, the damage isn't as great. So you hit a wall, but you can carry on without too many problems. Where in iRacing, you hit a wall, you will have to pit pretty much immediately. So it's quite interesting to sort of see the dynamic of drivers who have done a lot of iRacing, oval racing, which is what iRacing is pretty much built on, compared to how they jump into the Assetto Corsa and learning it on this one. It's fascinating to see. Right, the reason we're not getting too excited about the lights going on and everybody driving away and the engine notes rising is because they do a rolling start, Lewis, don't we? Now, we've got a few drivers, you pointed them out as we went into the advert, at the sharper end of the field. You wanted to give them a bit of a shout out, didn't you?
Yeah, I noticed, the main two I noticed were Kenny Press and Paul Laramie. I don't think they'll mind me saying, they're not front runners in our Touring Car Championship, but they're qualifying in the top 6, I believe, both of them.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to see them get the opportunity to be up there at the front in a place they haven't been before. It's really good to see them getting the hang of the NASCAR and them enjoying life towards the sharp end. And I hope we see a good race from everybody, but especially those who are not usually front runners. We're about to get underway.
We are indeed.
Away now.
We are indeed, and Andy McEwan does get a decent start on that, and yeah, we are racing, aren't we? Sorry, it looked a little bit slow on my screen, but I think there was a little bit of a lag, but Andy gets a decent start. He didn't go very early. Maybe that's a little bit of a tactic, knowing the circuit so well. Oliver Gibson hunkered up right behind, though, Rich Hayden and Kenny Press. Now, we have been notified that if you are in the slipstream, you are likely unable to get away. It's really powerful here at Auto Club, and Oliver Gibson already tries to sweep down on the inside. So what kind of momentum can Andy bring to the floor now as Kenny Press fires Rich Hayden into the wall almost? Very close to being a bit of a disaster for the owner of VRRC there, but he ends up down in 5th position, not hitting the wall too badly, so he gets away with that one. And he gets that run and has the momentum around the outside, so he holds on to that first place. Again, that racing experience around the circuit probably going to come in handy as Oliver Gibson tries to find new and inventive ways round the commentator. Kenny Press in third place, doing exceptionally well. I think started in 6th place, up to 3rd on the opening lap. Quickly, it's still Paolo Tempera, another one of the drivers that Lewis was shouting out just a couple of moments ago, pretty much going side by side for 3rd place, and Paolo Tempera going on to the podium for the time being. There's 38 minutes to go. It's a long time to hold on to that, as we see a big puff of smoke in the background, but no big spinners, just a lot of oversteer. I think Elliot Dalton-Ayres has dropped a couple of places. Joel Lask has as well. He's in 15th position. I did note that Josh Martin, we said he was only just in the top 10 in qualifying. Well, at the end of qualifying, he jumped up to 7th position, I believe. So good late surge from him means that he's in with a good shout, potentially another good result here. And I think it was Josh Martin melting into the wall there, actually, in his post-race interview, saying that as long as he qualifies in the top 10, you've got a good chance. He's got Kyle Felvers, Paul Laramie, and Nicky Taylor. 3 out of the top, 3 out of these 4 were on the top steps. They were in the podium last time out. So how can they settle themselves out now as they're fighting for the mid-pack? Lewis is getting very hectic at the front. It's getting very hectic in the middle. And then you've got the likes of Rich Hayden and Ethan Hill just sort of minding their own business.
Yeah, I think at the moment, everybody's trying to get to that front pack to be in it to win it. I think the way I think of NASCAR is really, you just have to be in with a shot on that final lap. Then anything can happen on that final lap. You just have to be there. I think at the moment, those at the front are trying their best to break away from this group. So if we look at Rich and Ethan going side by side, you can see a gap forming between them and the top 4. They're desperately wanting to not lose the draft, which they've lost a little bit, but they definitely want to catch them back up again. And that top 4 want to break away from them. It seems we've got 3 distinct groups at the moment, and the second group is desperately trying to catch up the first group, and the first group is desperately trying to pull away from the second group. It looks like Andy and Oliver have got a bit of a rhythm of passing each other on the straights in the hope that that pulls them further away by using that overspeed from the slipstream and not losing time in the corners by fighting side by side. And at the moment, it's also pulled the 2 cars behind them away from Rich. So it'll be interesting to see how this carries on throughout the race.
Yeah, we were told, weren't we, that it's very difficult to break the toe here at Auto Club, but if you manage it, it's pretty much impossible to get it back if you're the driver chasing, and that is the task that Rich Hayden finds himself trying to achieve now. He had a pretty awful race at Daytona. In fact, he ended up coming into the commentary box about 10 minutes before the end, to be honest, because he was that fed up with just crashing and going into the pits. They go 3 wide behind them with, I think there's Carl Felvers right in the middle, very distinct livery there with the Lightning McQueen 95 on the side of his car, right in the middle of Josh Martin just ahead, Ethan Hill on his outside, and then I think that's Paul Laramie just behind them, and they keep swapping positions. It's great to see, and I have to say, touch wood, Lewis, we're 5 minutes in, somehow, I don't know where that 5 minutes has gone, touch wood, no massive incidents considering how close they are racing, and unlike Daytona, how much more difficult this track is to drive.
Yeah, I think that's definitely down to the more practice that they've all done. Everybody seems to be having a better understanding of how to race side by side, but also, as we've mentioned before in the stream, this track is incredibly wide. They're going 4 wide in the background, and there's plenty of space between the cars. I think that is also having a big impact. The one thing I've noticed is Rich is lapping consistently on a 40.1, but that top group have started to fight a little bit more, and it's invited Rich along to the party now, as he's joined that group, and there's now a big gap between him and the cars behind now, because they've also been scrapping, so it seems like the top group haven't managed to break away fully. It was as soon as Paolo started making moves on Oliver and Andy, they started going side by side through the corners. I think that slowed them down a little bit, and Rich has just been sticking to that optimal line, and he's now in the tow, so he's now in the fight for the lead.
Yeah, I would say, though, if you're looking at the previous couple of times, actually, these guys are lapping in the low 40s. So 40, well, actually, on that last lap, it's completely ruined what I was about to say, that they were lapping at like 40.3s. That last lap there by Paolo Tempera is a 40.7, and he's just taken the lead. So you're right, they've slowed each other right up. That second group we saw Carl Felvers squeezing the life out of Josh Martin on that high line, didn't we? I was convinced there was going to be a massive crash. But they're sort of a little bit more aggressive with their defence, whereas we saw Andy and Oliver Gibson happily swapping places, and now they're swapping ends. Is that Rich Hayden? No, it is Rich Hayden, isn't it? And unfortunately, Kenny Press. That's absolutely good as Rich Hayden comes back on and always collects Josh Martin. Luckily, everybody gets away with it as Kenny Press has to come into the pits. I don't know if there's damage or whether he just ended up going into the pits and it locked him to go in. We'll have to wait and see, maybe hear from him after the race. But that is absolutely good. The first bit of incident that we've had here at Auto Club Speedway on a Wednesday night. The Nascar special events for VRRC, and Rich Hayden finds himself outside the top 10. And I have to say, all that hard work, Lewis, all of that stuff that we were just talking about, him catching up to the front pack, it's all just gone by the wayside now.
Yeah, he was really looking like a force to be reckoned with. As we see, I think that's Reese Bell who's been knocked into the pit lane. Very similar to what happened to Kenny. I think there was nothing Kenny could do at the angle that he got sent off at. I don't really know who was to fault for the incident, but Kenny couldn't really do much. He was sent straight into the pit lane. So I don't think he really had a choice about it. But what that's meant for the race is there's an even bigger gap now between these top three and the cars behind, which is now being led by Paul Laramie in 4th place. And that has left Rich all the way down in 12th, and Kenny is now still, he's come out from the pit, so he might have taken his mandatory stop. I'm not sure if he'll be able to make it to the end on fuel, but I think that's definitely a strategy he's going to have to employ, just to see whether he can make it to the end with no more pit stops. And hopefully if there's a caution or two, that will help bring him back onto the pack and give him track position, so he can hopefully do something towards the end.
Well, that's it, isn't it, as well? Because one of the notes that Andy gave us, and by the way, ladies and gentlemen, we were planning on bringing Andy back into the commentary booth, but I imagine he's concentrating so much he's actually in for a race of victory here. He'll probably hate us if we distract him at this point. So maybe we'll wait until he's in the mid sort of end of the race, or if there's a caution period to have another chat to him. But he was saying that the front tyres are likely going to be scrubbing a lot more than they did at Daytona. So Daytona, these modern NASCARs, you can just lap them until the fuel runs out and they don't really feel it. Whereas here, you're likely going to scrub those front tyres up, Lewis, aren't you? And that's going to cause a little bit more strategy.
Yeah, definitely. I think the problem is that scrubbing them then also overheats them and then causes the tyre pressures to spike quite a lot. I think a little debate the drivers will be having is, do they want to intentionally overpressure their tyres, which means there's more air in the tyres, so there's less tyre surface area in contact with the road, which means they won't heat up as much. Do they want to risk losing the grip from the optimal tyre pressure, but keeping them from overheating? It's a trick that's commonly used on iRacing, as Andy informed us as we were chatting about this earlier, and it does seem to work a little bit, but it's a very fine window that it works in. So it'll be interesting to see if people have opted to do that and how that may affect tyre wear, because that is something that is going to be a factor towards the middle of the race, is what are people going to do with tyres. Obviously they'll put the same compound back on the car, but when will they do that? When will they try and use the peak grip of the tyre? Because there is going to be a drop-off.
I'll tell you what, as soon as we invite you back into the commentary box, Lewis, it all gets a lot more technical, this commentary malarkey, doesn't it? We start talking about tyre temperatures and pressures and what that does to the physics of the car and everything like that. But it's very interesting. Of course, you're a lot more clued into how to set up a car than me, especially. Maybe Andy probably has something to say about that in terms of NASCAR. But yeah, it's nice to get a different insight, a different sort of perspective at this, and obviously a little bit more of a racing driver's perspective, I should say, especially on the sim racing. Right, we're getting a little bit of a 2x2 here with Carl Felvers versus Paul Laramie, Ethan Hill versus Josh Martin. It's still a four-way battle. You're starting to see them almost, are they working together now, Lewis, would you say? Or are they starting to think, you know what, we're still falling over each other somewhat here? Because if you look at the last laps, this little pack is going a touch faster than the leading pack. Do you think they know that? Do you think they can sniff an opportunity here?
I think definitely if they've got somebody in their team listening to the broadcast, we might be informing them, or if they've got somebody looking at the live timings for them, they may ask them whether they're catching or not. On that previous lap, they lost a few tenths to the lead group. They've dropped back by about 4 tenths since the incident with Rich and Kenny Press. So overall, it's stabilised at about 9 tenths at the moment. I think definitely Kyle and Ethan will be looking to work together as they are teammates as part of HFT. And I think Josh, with knowing Josh's racecraft, he will want to win, and he'll know the best way he can do that is by working with the cars around him to win. And I think Paul Laramie's probably going to have the same attitude, so they're probably going to be trying to work together at this point to see if they can reel in this front group. They gained a couple of tenths on the group on the last lap. If they just keep going like this, they might get a lucky caution that comes out where that gap is a bit big enough that the front cars, the top 3, can't pit, but they might be able to go in the pits. It might give them an advantage. Things like that they might be on the lookout for, as well as just trying to get that gap closed down and work together.
Yeah, well, there's we ended up in NASCAR generally. We saw this last week as well. They put out almost competition cautions, don't they? Where they sort of put them out just to close everybody up, just to give the spectators more action, basically, in front of them. I thought I saw a bit of a crash in the background of Elliot Dalton-Ayres, and that took my attention down to that end of the... in fact, there has been a crash. No, Elliot Dalton-Ayres comes into the pits, actually. Maybe that was a different crash, maybe it wasn't. I'm not entirely sure, but it did take my attention all the way down to that sort of just outside the top 10, or that top 10 fight, I should say. And I didn't realise Nicky Taylor, he was once in that sort of battle for the 4th, 5th position. Now he's sort of been lost by the wayside somewhat. He's in 8th place, which is pretty decent, but he's in the battle for 8th place. So Josh Martin, who's the 7th, is quite a long way up the road. So it's not going particularly brilliant for Nicky Taylor. Out of the 3 HFT boys, and of course came on the second step of the podium last week, did Nicky. Now inside the top 10, anywhere inside the top 10, you have a half-decent shout. The small caution period comes up. But just like Lewis said, it's all about the timing, and it's all about the strategy, and whether you can predict it, whether you can adapt to it as soon as possible. I think last week at Lewis, we heard Josh and Eric Axel say they had predetermined when they were going to pit. So they basically ignored all the caution periods, and they said, no, we're going to pit on lap 70 or whatever it was. And that was their strategy. That was it. They weren't wavering from it. And it didn't... I felt that there was a missed opportunity for those drivers who could have come into the first caution period, got that pit stop done and dusted, and then got back out there and sort of been into a good position. Is that the sort of thing you have to think about when you're out there? That sort of adaptability to the scenario around you?
Yeah, you absolutely do. And as a sim racer, you usually don't have a whole team of race engineers, as I believe we are now under one of those competition cautions that we've been talking about.
Ah, yes.
They've all slowed down nicely. So I think we'll see everybody peel into the pits now. And as predicted, Andy has gone for that. Oliver Gibson has decided to risk it and stay out. Now, there is the possibility of more caution, but everybody's going very slowly at the moment. And that kind of gives you an advantage to pit now, because I'm pretty sure you'll be able to make the end no problem if you put the right fuel and get a new set of tyres on. Should be fine until the end. And it seems like almost everybody has decided that that is the way to go, except for Oliver Gibson and Reese Bell and Kenny Press and Nathan Blank, who looks like he's coming in the pits. So the only people that have stayed out are the 2 people who pitted earlier in the race due to incidents, and Oliver Gibson, who, to be fair, might just come in on the end of this lap, but he's going even slower now.
Yes, if he was going to come in at this lap, you'd think that he'd be being a bit cheeky and going a little bit quicker, so nobody has an opportunity to catch up. But look, everybody's caught him up. If he does come into the pit now, he'll come out in dead last. You get the impression that there was a mistake in there potentially for Oliver Gibson. He's obviously now banking on having a caution period later in the race and it getting him out of jail. But even then, even if he's rounding out in the top 5, say, and the caution period comes out, nobody else comes into the pits apart from him. He'll come out in dead last again. I think he's banking on everybody having to come into the pit again, but we are nearly halfway through this race. So the likelihood is that's not going to be needed because, of course, while you're under a caution period, the tyres aren't getting scrubbed. The fuel isn't getting used as much. You're able to save a little bit of life. You actually basically get 3 laps for free. So we're going to be racing with 20 minutes to go, and the cars will last that with no pit stops or anything like that. We do restrict the fuel, so they have to come in at some point. But with the majority of cars having done that, very odd, I would say, from Oliver Gibson, and I fear. Don't want to put the commentator's curse on him or anything like that, but I fear he may just well have chucked away a good opportunity. We'll have to wait and see if he's smarter than I, which wouldn't be the most surprising thing in the world. Right, I believe the caution period is still underway, or Lewis will be racing. It almost looks like we're racing. We are racing, yeah. So again, the camera's almost playing a little bit of a trick on me. I thought they were going relatively slowly, but they were just charging everything up. And Oliver Gibson, well, he gets a good lead from Ethan Hill, Paolo Tempera, Carl Felvers, and then Andy McEwan, who's dropped all the way down to 5th. A great pit stop from Carl Felvers and Ethan Hill especially. Paolo Tempera was already amongst those top 3, but Ethan Hill jumping all the way into 2nd place. It's been a fantastic caution period for himself. Josh Martin hasn't had the same story. He's now down in 8th place. He's actually behind Nicky Taylor. Can you imagine that? At the end, going into that pit stop, we thought there was no chance Nicky Taylor was going to be in amongst it. But there we go. That's NASCAR for you. Andy Cowell, Kenny Press ending up in the wall. Andy Cowell is now in the pits as a consequence of that, as Paolo Tempera slips down to 4th. As Andy McEwan goes through, Josh Martin, Nicky Taylor swapping position, Paul Laramie and Eric Axelson also swapping positions. A look at the lead that Oliver Gibson has got as Ethan Hill, Andy McEwan, Paolo Tempera, and Carl Felvers. No, it's not quite Carl Felvers, is it? But those 4 drivers going side by side pretty much. Paolo Tempera gets the inside. There's contact between Ethan Hill and Andy McEwan. Can he hold it? Yes, he can.
He's done an amazing job there to keep the car nice and planted and to get in front of that group as well. Yeah, it seemed like Andy didn't have quite the quickest pit stop. I think Kyle and Ethan must have put a lot less fuel in or not changed their tyres. So they may have to fuel save or they might be in trouble with tyres towards the end, if that is indeed the case. Or Andy just had a slow pit stop. We'll have to see towards the end, but that could be another little element. This issue for Oliver Gibson is quite almost similar to what happened with Eric and Josh when they didn't get under the first caution. As I think Paolo touched the wall a little bit there, that's going to give an opportunity to Joel Last to go through. But last week, Eric and Josh decided to pit on whatever lap it was. And as they were coming into the pits, Rich called a competition caution. But because the cars were still slowing down from racing speed rather than already at caution speed, they did still lose out to the group that pitted under the first caution. But they didn't lose too much time. But I think Oliver Gibson is going to need them to be at caution pace when he decides to make his pit stop if he still wants to be in with a chance at the win. It'll be interesting to see if there's another caution and if he can dig himself out of trouble.
The problem is, though, he'll be the one who's slowing them down to caution pace, won't he? And then all of a sudden he'll go into the pit stops and everybody's just going to easily drive past no matter what speed they go. So it's dead last anyway. I could be completely wrong. We'll have to wait and see. Right, the top 4 have somewhat gapped themselves. Oliver Gibson, obviously, we mentioned, had a really good run. Andy McEwan's managed to get his head down and put into qualifying laps with those new tyres that we suspect. I am going to go with your theory. I think he's put on tyres and put fuel in, whereas I reckon some of the other drivers, Carl Felvers and the likes, have dropped back somewhat. I think maybe struggling with the weight. Of course, they're not going to be as quick regardless, so maybe they tried to skimp on the fuel a little bit, so maybe they are going to have to fuel save. But it is worth noting that whilst you are fuel saving around here, it's a little bit easier than, say, Daytona. You do have to lift, and so while you're slipstreaming someone, you can lift off a little bit potentially, and there is a little bit more to play with the slipstream as well. So it's there's every opportunity that they're able to make that work. We'll have to wait and see as Andy now pulls on to the back of Oliver Gibson. It'd be very interesting if we pulled him into the commentary box, maybe as these two sort of calm themselves down, so we can get a little bit of his perspective on what happened during that caution period. But Joel Lask and Paolo Tempera are nicely going at it as well, as Oliver Gibson ends up conceding to Andy. But I get the impression, Lewis, that these two are going to be working together, because remember, they did do that quite early on, about 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, as they see a car up wide, I think that's Andy Carroll that they're going to have to navigate. They were working together really well at the start of the race before the others in the pack decided to get involved in trying to get to the lead, which slowed them down again. I think they have a good chance to break away if they work together now. It all really depends on how much tyres Oliver Gibson has left, I think. Does he have the ability to follow Andy and trade places with him? Because Andy is setting a blistering pace. He's a full 0.3 quicker than Oliver Gibson on the last lap, and 0.6 quicker than the cars behind him as well. And I think they're going to drag him in now to get his thoughts on that move. So, Andy, you're now in first. What's the plan?
Hey there.
Is that it?
Pretty much. Look, I'm not a thinking man. I get in the rig, I press a few pedals, I turn the wheel a few times, and I hope for the best. That's really my strategy to sim racing. But yeah, I mean, one thing that actually you guys can probably help me on this, because it's quite hard to keep track of the strategies when you're in the race. But did Oliver pit at that last round of pit stops? Because I suddenly seem to have quite a bit of pace on him, and of course I'm on fresh tyres.
No, he didn't. So Oliver Gibson was one of two drivers that didn't pit at all under that caution period, which for us seems an extremely confusing strategy. Can you put any clarity or any sense to what Oliver might have tried there?
Well, yes, probably, because I actually considered doing the same thing. I thought that because we had track position, myself, Oliver, and I think it was Paolo were having an amazing ding-dong fight at the front. And
absolutely.
Our pace was pretty strong. We were gapping the rest of the field. It didn't really feel like the tyres... You could feel that the grip was going away, but it didn't feel like it was slowing us down overly. And track position is so important around here, not only because it's not easy to pass, but you just don't want to get caught up in any of the shenanigans going on further back, and it looked like there were plenty of them. So I did consider staying out, keep the track position, but then that would mean that you're relying on there being another caution. If there isn't one, then, you know, you're kind of stuck out there then, and you're going to have to pit under green because we don't have enough fuel to get to the end without a pit stop. And even if there is a caution, it means you're going to give yourself less time to get back through the pack. So, yeah, all in all, I think I probably got it right, as is sort of being proven now.
Yeah, but there's a number of drivers who went and jumped a lot of positions. Ethan Hill went from about 6th or 7th. He jumped into the top 3. He was in amongst you. In fact, I think he came out in 2nd place actually. Are you suspicious, because you came out in 5th, even though you were 1st? Are you suspicious that maybe some people didn't take? Oh, as we see someone in the wall. Who is that? Is that Rich Hayden? I thought it was you, Andy, facing the wrong way, but no, it is Rich. Your teammate is facing the wrong way in the high line of, I think, turn 1. So be careful when you go around on that one. He's now coming down onto the apron, which a bit of a shame to see Rich crashing out, as I believe he was in quite a lot of practice. But yeah, are you under the suspicion that maybe the likes of Ethan Hill and Carl Feldes didn't take tyres or took less fuel? Is that something that's a viable option?
Yeah, so I know for a fact I put more fuel in than I need, and I was also very...
Sorry, Andy, there was a bit of an incident. Who's that facing the wrong way? It's Paolo Tempera, one of the drivers you were having such a good ding-dong with earlier on, literally sat in the middle of the circuit on the start-finish line, and I think collected a few drivers. Lewis, did you get to see who those drivers were potentially?
I'm not sure he collected anyone, but I think he certainly scared quite a few of them, just being stationary in the middle of the road. We were on board following Kyle and that battle, and then suddenly they just saw Paolo sat in the middle of the road, dead stationary, and they all had to dive either side of him to make sure that they didn't end their races as well as his, as he has now sadly retired, that he's not on the track causing hazard to anybody.
Yeah, not everybody can have such an easy race as Mr. McEwan is doing, a 2.5 on the road from Oliver Gibson at the moment. So, sorry, finish what you were saying there, Andy, about the different fuel and whether you think the likes of Carl is maybe under fuel.
Yeah, so I know I put more fuel in than I need. I was also very cautious coming into the pit lane because at Daytona I slid through my pit box a few times when I came in. So I probably left a good handful of seconds on the table. That's just because I'm not that familiar with AC and fuel mileage on here, and I don't want to run out of fuel with a couple of laps to go. So it could just be that I had a particularly slow pit stop. But yeah, that's one of the things that I'm sure some drivers have been practicing is, how much fuel to take on if you pit at certain points, because you can fight for 15 or 20 minutes on the track to try and gain a second on someone. You can lose 4 or 5 seconds by doing something differently in the pit lane. So, yeah, it's one of the things I hope to see out of this race, actually, was a bit of a change, a bit of a variety in fuel strategy, because having fresh tyres matters, having the right amount of fuel on board matters, certainly a lot more than it did a week ago.
Absolutely, and it all takes that weight on board as well. I was wondering whether the likes of Carl Felvis, who has more weight to start with, competition rates obviously, takes less fuel because it's less weight ultimately extra for him to take and all that sort of thing, trying to balance it all out, I suppose. Lewis, we're watching Paul Laramie versus Ethan Hill, and Paul Laramie was one of those drivers he gave a shout out to for qualifying so well at the beginning of the broadcast, and he's racing brilliantly as well. So is Ethan Hill, which hopefully his steering wheel can hold up to the test this time round, and they're having a great battle, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. Paul Laramie looks really quite at home racing amongst other drivers. I think Paul is also a real-life driver as well. I think that definitely, that awareness you have to have when driving a real car, because a crash results in a heavy bill on your end.
Absolutely.
I think it helps with that awareness of just knowing you can't afford to hit somebody or be collected by somebody, even if it's not your fault. It's going to be a hefty bill if somebody shunts you. You've always got to be thinking about, could somebody understeer wide and hit me here? Could somebody oversteer, get a snap, and then be in the side of me? Could somebody outbrake themselves and then be in the side of me? Could someone brake too early and then I go into them? All of those things go through your mind when you're a real-life driver, and I think that helps. And I think it's shown in some of the race debriefs when we've looked at how people avoid incident. The real-life drivers, especially Josh and Nicky, are really good at knowing where to put their car to gain as many, well, to lose as little from incidents and to keep their car as safe as possible. And I think that's really benefiting the real-life drivers in NASCAR, where they've got to adapt to running on the bumper and door-to-door at 200 miles an hour. I think that's really something they'll have to have learnt from.
Yeah, one of the quotes that I quite often said when I was driving in real life was, where the hell did that come from? And I think that's probably what Paul Laramie and Ethan Hill were thinking when Eric Axelson decided to go from the outside on the approach and dive up the inside. That was about as close to a track move that we've seen, actually. And, well, Eric Axelson has made it work as well. And he was nowhere in qualifying, really. It's 12th or 13th, which, don't get me wrong, is not the end of the world. But for Eric Axelson standards, who we're probably used to speaking to after qualifying more than anybody else, it's rather shocking. Also shocking is, I believe, we are not under caution period.
We are.
Oh, we are. I think we're under a competition caution, aren't we? Because I was about to say Oliver Gibson has come into pit, which would surprise me greatly.
Second time.
Yes, there are quite a number of drivers that are coming in for a second time, and that must be because they didn't take tyres or they didn't think they took enough fuel. Who has come into the pits? Nicky Taylor, Ethan Hill, Kyle Felvis. That all surprises me slightly, and maybe because they decided to not take that fuel, they decided that was the wrong thing to do, maybe, and they're going to have to go out and correct that. Interesting to see, but that is Carl Felvis sat there along with Ethan Hill. And I believe, I don't know, Lewis, if you can see on any of your timing, are we under a controlled caution?
Yeah, I think we definitely are. Cause you can see as we swap to Andy, I think Andy can go a bit quicker than that if he wanted to.
Yeah, no, I was curious. Yeah, I was curious as to why he was dragged out of our commentary box all of a sudden. I thought, oh, maybe something's about to happen. But, of course, everybody needs to be in the competition Discord as well to be able to hear what Rich Hayden is saying over the mic. He'll be saying whether there's going to be a caution period or whether there's going to be clean racing. They're not allowed to talk to each other through that competition because the airwaves have to be clear for anything that Rich has to say to anybody. And obviously, there don't want to be any sort of incidents that they have to evaluate afterwards or anything like that. But it means that everybody has to be in there. And of course, Andy, being one of those drivers these days, has to be in there every so often as well. So if we don't speak to Andy for 5 or 10 minutes, then you probably know why. He's probably been dragged in to the competition Discord. Right, everybody's come into the pits. Probably for the last time, I would say, Lewis, with 8.5 minutes to go. We'll run down the top 10. Andy McEwan on top with Joel Lask in second place. He sort of snuck there without me really realising as well. Eric Axelson, after we've seen a couple of great moves by him, working his way through the field. He is a testament, I would say. This race from Eric Axelson is a testament to if you don't qualify quite where you want to, doesn't really matter as long as you stay consistent and stay in the race for as long as possible. And like Lewis said, you only need to be there, in with a chance on the last lap, then anything can happen. Paul Laramie is in 4th. Josh Martin is in 5th. John Jones is in 6th. Good race from John Jones and Simon Thorpe at the moment, 6th and 7th. Oliver Gibson is in 8th. He was leading the race for quite a substantial amount of time, but maybe the pit stops haven't worked in his favour, although he probably will have fresher tyres now than the drivers ahead of him, so he could come back to him. Nicky Taylor is in 9th with Ethan Hill in 10th and Kyle Felvers in 11th place. Andy Carroll, Reece Bell, Rich Hayden and Nathan Blank round out the rest of the field, and Paolo Tempera, Kenny Press and Elliot Daltonaires being the unfortunate did not finishers so far in this particular race. Right, Lewis, 7 minutes and 20 seconds of racing to go. One driver peels into the pits from the back. I think that was Nathan Blank, as Andy McEwan waits for the longest amount of time possible before he gets gets his foot down. Pedal to the metal, and away we go racing once again. Joel Lask gets a good running, stays on Andy McEwan's tail, but Eric Axelson maybe just caught sleeping just a touch. He has Paul Laramie trying to find a way around him, but he doesn't manage it. For the time being, a little bit of smoke puffed up on the inside of the corner. Maybe John Jones was one of the drivers who created that, but the top 5 are somewhat getting away here with Oliver Gibson moving up to 6th position. Everybody else going 2 by 2 with the KFC car. John Jones getting mugged out to the outside here as the rest of them feed their way down onto the white line and getting that optimum racing position. Joel Lask goes into the race lead. For how much longer, we'll have to wait and see. 6.5 minutes to go. 2 wide for the race lead. Then we've got single file all the way back to this fight for the top, for 7th place, I believe that is, with Ethan Hill just behind Oliver Gibson and Nicky Taylor. Now, Oliver Gibson, I said maybe he's going to come back to him. He's got those fresh tyres, Lewis, and maybe there's something in that.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how much of a difference he can make. And it'll be interesting because Andy mentioned before the broadcast that he'd been working quite well with Joel Lask. And look which 2 drivers are at the front at the moment, working together. And one thing I'll also add to that is whilst Eric might be in 3rd place, his teammate Josh Martin has just dropped down to 9th place. So his teammate, if you like, who he'd want to be in his corner, is unfortunately not in with a shout of pushing him along at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see if Josh can make up those places, see if he can help Eric. But at the moment, he's actually holding his own quite nicely and keeping with the other top 2. And there's a very small gap starting to appear between the top 3 and Oliver Gibson and Ethan Hill, and then the group behind. It'll be interesting to see if Oliver and Ethan can now work together. And Oliver might have pulled a blinder if his fresh tyre advantage can make the difference. He might have got out of a tricky situation and actually really benefited from it. Find out in 4 minutes and 53 seconds.
Yeah, I think if anybody out there is wondering why I didn't become a race strategist, I think this race is pretty much the epitome of the reason why. Because Oliver Gibson is in with a great shout, and I said that he'd be dead last after the second round, after he had come into the pit stops. I was clearly wrong, because he's right in there in the sharp end, with Joel Lask leading, with Eric Axelson being the thorn in the side, and Andy McEwan's actually dropped down into 5th position. Ethan Hill's in there as well. There's a 5-way scrap now with 4 minutes and 30 seconds to go. You just hope, you pray that they actually keep it as clean as what they have done for the last 35 minutes, that's for sure, because this one looks like it's going to go down to the wire. Eric Axelson on that white line, on that inside line. Ethan Hill actually now. Those 2 drivers definitely weren't in with a shout at winning this race about 20 minutes ago. Probably not even 5 minutes ago. I wouldn't have put my money on it either. But they're right there. They're getting a good go of it. And Andy McEwan's actually getting overtaken by Oliver Gibson now. They're trying to make it 3 wide. Here comes Kyle Feldes as well. Let's not write him off. And his HFT teammate, Nicky Taylor. You only need to lead it for the last 5 meters of the race to take home the top step of the podium. And maybe that's what Kyle and Nicky are planning on doing, because, of course, it was dramatic at Daytona. It looks like it's going to be equally dramatic at Auto Club Speedway. 3 minutes and 40 seconds left to go. That's probably going to be about 5 laps. And Lewis with 7 drivers all in with a shout here. Don't know which way to call it, but at the moment, it's Ethan Hill leading.
It absolutely is. But one thing to note is we've got 2 sets of teammates. We've got the HFT boys, well, all 3 of the HFT drivers. And then you've got Andy and Joel. We've got 2 groups of people who work well together, mixed in with Oliver Gibson, who will just have to work with anybody, but he has the fresh tyres. So knowing who's going to come out on top after all of this is, we're not going to know. We're just going to have to wait and find out.
Yeah, we will, and we'll wait with bated breath. I can feel myself almost wanting to get off my seat in a way that only NASCAR can make me do when I'm commentating, to be honest. I never really enjoy watching it, and then every so often I get to commentate on it, and you get sucked in. It's fantastic. As soon as you buy into the strategy, to the drama, to the close racing, it can be the most absorbing sport in the world, and it is like no other motorsport on the planet once you actually get involved. And we're hoping that a lot of you at home have had your head turned by this amazing super speedway sport, because there is nothing quite like it as Eric Axelson and Oliver Gibson make contact. And I don't think Oliver Gibson's going to come out of that with a spin, but he is certainly going to be hampered. The progress is going to be sort of scurried away somewhat, but with 2 minutes to go, it's not the end of the world for him, and it's not the end of the world for Eric Axelson either, as the drivers just outside the top 10 are scrapping to get back in there. So I think the battle is now between 5 drivers as someone's in the wall. Big puff of smoke, and it's Josh Martin. Josh Martin in the wall, and is collected by Simon Thorpe, I want to say that was, in 12th place. I could be wrong. We'll have to wait and see. I think it was Simon Thorpe and Josh Martin. Yes, it was. So, yeah, Josh, unfortunately, Dave won't like that in the YouTube chat, but we'll have to wait and see what they have to say at a later date, because Ethan Hill, Joel Lask, Andy McEwan, Nicky Taylor, and Eric Axelson, Kyle Feldes, and Oliver Gibson are still around and about, but probably a little bit too far back for the last minute and a half. We'll have to wait and see how these guys end up finishing this race. A minute and a half to go. Lewis, I'm going to throw you under the bus here. I'll throw you under a NASCAR at this rate. That'll hurt a lot more, the speed that these guys are going. Who are you going to call? Who's your money on?
I'm going to say it. I'm going to trust in our co-commentator, Andy McEwan, to take the win somehow. I think he's been looking here and there to figure out where he can get past. He's tried different lines. He's been on the low, in the mid, and in the high lines. He's just been looking around to see where he can possibly make those moves. And he's got a wealth of oval experience. So I think that is going to help him somehow take the win. But it is going to be close. It could be any one of this group that could take home the win.
Well, Ethan Hill is certainly in a good position at the moment, isn't he? Because he's got about a 2/10 gap from Nicky Taylor and Joel Lask as well. All 3 of these drivers not really in with a shout of winning this race for the majority of the 40-minute expedition, I would say, that we've been going on at the moment. But with Ethan Hill, with about 1 lap to go, we will be on the final lap now. We have started it. He's got a 3.5 gap, I believe. Oh, no, it's actually reduced down to 1/10, as is the nature with NASCAR. And there's contact in the background. Was that Joel Lask and Andy McEwan going on the high line now? Is that going to allow Oliver Gibson to sweep up the middle? No, I think that's a back-marking Rich Hayden who's involved, actually. It's making it a little bit confusing. The pack has now spread themselves somewhat. It is Andy McEwan down in 7th place. So Lewis Edwards' guess is probably going to go by the wayside. But Ethan Hill, Nicky Taylor, who's going to take the top step? We'll wait and see. Maybe none of them if they take that contact. But as they round out the final corner, it looks like it's going to be Ethan Hill to take the top step here at Auto Club Speedway. Ethan Hill, with a working steering wheel for once, ends up taking the victory. Nicky Taylor, for a second time in as many weeks, comes home in 2nd place. And then Joel Lask ends up in 3rd. Oliver Gibson rounds out 4th place, and well, he didn't quite win it, but he certainly proved me wrong. I'm guessing he was going to come near the back. Eric Axelsen ended up just pipping Carl Felbers into the top 5. Carl Felbers in 6th place. Andy McEwan, our pole sitter, ended up in 7th. Paul Laramie in 8th place. Andy Carroll in 9th. And John Jones in 10th. And I tell you what, Lewis, that is going to be one popular victory.
That absolutely is. I'm really happy for Ethan. I know he's been trying so hard to get his wheel to work for a start,
Yes.
but then to constantly practice and get up to pace. And I think he's going to be absolutely over the moon with what I think might be his first victory, overall victory in VRRC. I remember he won a Cayman Cup race at the Nürburgring, I believe it was, when we ran
your
that.
memory's better than me.
He was all the way up against the pit wall trying to pass somebody on the last lap, I think it was, win the race. So it's really nice to see one of the nicest guys in VRRC take his first overall win. I think it's going to be a really popular win for Ethan, but really gutting for Andy. He looked so on pace to be right there for the win, but just didn't quite work out for him in the end.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we'll have a chat to Andy, to Rich, and of course Ethan Hill, Nicky Taylor, and Joel Lask in a couple of minutes' time. But first of all, we're going to shoot to a quick advert. And we are back in the room, and we've got a whole host of excitable drivers in the commentary box. They were all gabbing away. We actually had to shut them up just before we came live, but that means we got plenty to say, hopefully, as well. We're going to start off with the man who took the victory, and a very popular victory, as we've just been discussing as well. Ethan Hill, a massive congratulations. We were contemplating whether that was one of your first victories in VRRC. We couldn't remember that many, mainly because of hardware issues, I'm sure, obviously, but that must be very satisfying.
It really is. It's only my second win, because I won this race 2 at the Nürburgring in the Porsche Championship, and that was nearly a year ago. So it's actually only my second win.
Okay, the most shocking thing about that, sorry, is the fact that Lewis Edwards actually called that on the broadcast about 3 minutes ago as well. The fact that his memory is that good is ridiculous. But yes, no, well, massive congratulations. That was an extremely exciting race as well to win. Did you have any idea with 10 minutes to go that you would even be within a shout?
No, but as me, Nicky, and Kyle all got pitted for new tyres in the second safety car, that made us catapult all the way to the front.
I was going to say, was that something you planned? That you were hoping there was going to be a second caution period as the first one came out? Because, of course, everybody pitted that first caution period, and then some were sort of half in, half out when it came to the second one.
Yeah, I think it's because most people pitted for tyres on the first safety car. Because when you do your one stop, you get it out of the way, and then you can go to the end of the race. But as we went for fuel the first time, we didn't have to pit for fuel for the second time and get tyres. That made us catapult all the way to the front.
So was that something you planned, or was that something that you reacted to as soon as the first caution came out?
Yeah, it was. In our Google Meet, we were all talking to each other like, yes, pit, tyres, go. So yeah, it was a really good win. Really good win.
I'm glad it worked out for you. And one thing about your steering wheel and everything and your sort of hardware issues, is that something that you're hoping has been put behind you now?
I really, really hope so. I mean, I haven't had any issues, touch wood, for a couple of weeks now since obviously I got my podium in Imola. So the only way is up from here.
Well, fantastic. As I said, it's a very popular victory in the YouTube chat as well. So I'll let you go and enjoy and bask in all the glory, of course, Ethan. Congratulations.
Thank you, Jack.
Right. And I believe Lewis Edwards has a second place man alongside you. Lewis, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here with Nikki Taylor. Nikki, another P2, and it was another case of you didn't quite make it to the front group at the start, but at the end you were on Ethan's bumper in second place. Was it another case of the race came to you through strategy, or was there a driving style or approach difference that you made halfway through?
To be fair, I think a bit of both, because at the start from qualifying, the weight was just appalling for me, and for me, Kyle and Josh. Josh somehow managed to extract it and get a 39 out of it, but me and Kyle literally couldn't wrap our heads around it on how we were like not even breaking into a 39. So the weight hindered me in quali, so I got 13th, but that's what it's there to do. And at the end of the day, yeah, I just tried to make my way through. Didn't use tires on the first pit stop, and then I can't remember if it was Kyle, mine, or Ethan's idea for the tires on the second one. But yeah, when we pitted for the second safety car, literally done tires because mine and Kyle's front rights were in orange, so we basically needed them anyway. I somehow managed to jump Ethan and Kyle in the pits in the second stop, and I don't know how, but we'll get to that point. I don't know how that will happen, but yeah, but no, Ethan was quicker, and he managed to get through the pack when he did, and yeah, I think me and Kyle were just happy to sit in behind, and then I don't know what happened with Kyle, but I think just a little bit of contact sent him back, but it's still good. Kyle doesn't have to be too displeased because he's still second, and I can't do next week, so he should be title effectively first in the championship and title contender. But at the end of the day, I'm just happy to come home with P2 and on how the race planned out.
Well, that answered my next point of are you happy that you're still leading the championship if you can't do next week? It would be really good if you could somehow find a way so we can see a finale between you, Kyle, Joel, and Ethan, and Oliver Gibson are the top 5. So is there any chance you can join us for the finale, or is it a definite no?
I don't know. I'll have to talk to my dad because I'm working in London next week, servicing some fire alarms and intruder alarms. So we'll have to see how it goes. I might be able to sneak off a bit early and get a train back to Norwich and literally do the race and then get a train back up and be up there for next week. But I don't know. That's asking a bit. So I'll assume no. And at the end of the day, with coming away leading the championship after P2, this is effectively, if I can't do next week, this is effectively what I think of the max I could have done. And to be fair, coming second in both races behind two HFT teammates, I couldn't really complain too bad.
Yeah, you've definitely done the team game there, and you've definitely scored some solid points as well. So well done, Nikki.
Thank you.
Jack is now with our third place.
I am indeed. I've got Joel Lask alongside me. Joel, that was a brilliantly hectic race all round, but you were in the front pack, then you were sort of fighting to get back in there. You were sort of here, there, and everywhere, weren't you really? How much different is it to race at Daytona compared to here? It must be a real shock.
Yeah, massively different. I was like half a second off the pace of everyone's qualifying times, which wasn't great. So it started me right at the back. I think I was like second from last, but yeah, I must admit, having to let off into the corners is a little bit different. I just didn't find the right lines. I much prefer Daytona, to be fair. But here's what it is. You live and learn.
Well, if you were starting that far back, you've said that you couldn't quite find the rhythm of the track, the sort of lifting and everything like that. How on earth did you end up third then? Explain it from your perspective, the last 40 minutes race.
Yeah, well, the first race that we did at Daytona, we didn't do pit stops for tires, or at least I didn't, and I managed to make them last. And then, as I was practicing just before this race, I realised that the tires weren't holding on as well as I thought. And I did a practice pit stop and see that the amount of time it took to put fuel in, it only took about a second longer to put new tires on. So decided new tires was the way to go. And after that first caution, that was it. The tyres came live, new set of tyres, and I was literally driving past everyone. It was great. They just didn't quite make it. I mean, if it was 2 laps sooner, maybe at the end, I'd probably been all right. But those last 2 laps were carnage. The tyres are completely gone by that point.
So you didn't take tyres twice then?
No, it was just the once. I kept the track position thinking that my tyres would probably hold on, but they literally fell off a cliff with 2 laps to go. So that was lesson learned there, I must admit.
Well, I have to say, look forward to seeing how you take all those lessons into Bristol next week as well. Do you feel like it's been a bit of a baptism of fire, this championship?
Yeah, but do you know what? It's great fun. It's one of these ones where you are literally giving all your might, a complete focus for the whole race, and it's nerve wracking. You never know what's going to happen. 1 minute you're right at the front, the next minute you're 7 cars down. So, yeah, no, it's great fun. Absolutely love it.
I was going to say, it's amazing how there's only 2 corners compared to Silverstone Grand Prix. And yet I feel like I can relax around Silverstone Grand Prix a lot more than I can relax
Oh, yeah.
around an oval circuit. Brilliant, Joel. Thank you very much for coming and having a chat, and congratulations on the 3rd place.
Appreciate it. Have a good one.
Right, Lewis, the interviews don't stop there. Let's have a chat and get a bit of a summary of how the end of that race went for our co-commentator. Andy, I get the impression that it's not where you wanted to finish, given where you ran for 99% of the race and qualified. Take us through it.
Do you know what, though? That just sums up NASCAR, and it's why I love it so much. It is the single most unpredictable form of motorsport out there, and regularly you see drivers lead for 490 miles of a 500-mile race, only for something to happen at the end. It was a bit unfortunate, really, because I had good pace. I pitted at the first pit stop. I chatted to you about that before, and my reasoning why. But I'd realised quite early on that you were going to have to pit for tyres again if there was another caution in the latter part of the race, because, as Joel was just saying, that right front tyre takes such a beating around here. Unfortunately, I was in the broadcast booth at the time that the caution was called, so I missed the caution. I wasn't using those exact words, but if you're willing to take the blame, then I'm happy to go with that. But basically, that meant that, I was stuck out there in old tyres. I didn't really want to pit. I could have pitted a lap later than everyone, but then I'd have been right at the back, and I didn't really feel that I had enough time with 6-7 minutes to get back to the front. So, all things considered, I think I did a reasonably good job of staying in the fight. I was making that high line work reasonably well. But yeah, once I fell back, I just didn't have the grip in dirty air to get back to the front. Nearly got there, and you get the run, you try and pass the leaders, but then you get boxed out at the next corner, and all that work's undone. So frustrating, but that is what NASCAR's all about, and hopefully it looked good, because let me tell you, that was the most fun I've had in a long time. So I hope everyone watching at home enjoyed it as much as we did being a part of it.
I was going to say, like I said during the last 5 minutes, NASCAR I want to get off my feet in a way that no other motorsport makes me. It makes me stand up in a sort of a way that it sucks you right in, doesn't it? Because a lot of people don't think there's that much strategy, but there's so much strategy. You're trying to keep an eye on how everybody's getting on. There's 7 cars in a fight for the race win on the last lap. As you said, you don't get that anywhere else.
Yeah, and I think, again, it was Joel who said it best, really. From a driver's perspective, you do not get a moment to relax. Even when you're out on your own, actually, it's hard enough to get one of these things around a track quickly without other cars around you. But there were points in that race where we were going into a corner at 195 miles an hour, 4 wide, and we're closer together than people would park outside their local supermarket, but we're doing nearly 200 miles an hour. So you go off into that corner, everyone has to pick a lane, and you've just got to try and avoid each other, find a bit where no one else has gone, don't turn into someone, don't drift up into someone. The dirty air is affecting the handling as well. It's so much harder than it looks, and I think this is part of the problem. The pros make it look so much easier than it is, and I really do hope that some of the drivers on our grid who have never experienced this before are starting to realise that it's mentally draining, it's physically demanding, and more than anything, it's really good fun.
Yeah, last thing before we let you go, Andy, and we finish off the broadcast, obviously. I didn't say it because I didn't want to jinx it through that race, but I thought the driving standards were 10 times better than they were at Daytona. I thought the quality of the race and the excitement and how close everybody was, considering this is almost a harder track. I know it's very wide, but there's a little bit more driver involvement, isn't there, than Daytona? It was sensational racing from start to finish.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the point I made earlier. You know, you've got options here. If
Yeah.
you are at Daytona and you get a run in the draft, you just can't go anywhere. And so the temptation is to smack into the car ahead or make a slightly dicey 3-wide move. Whereas here, you can pull out of that draft and try and make a pass. I also think maybe people put practice in this week.
Yeah.
It's a harder track, but that actually means that it's more rewarding the more laps you put in. So doing 30 laps of practice at Daytona, you're not really going to learn anything because you're doing it on your own. You've got to be in the pack, you've got to be in the draft. Whereas here, just circulating on your own for half an hour at a time will teach you a lot about how the car feels and how it's going to respond to certain things. So, yeah, I agree. The driving standards were really good. I felt safe out there, dicing with everybody. Even at the end, when it was getting a bit dicey, 4 wide, I never really felt that I was in any real danger of being taken out. And yeah, it's just as well, really, because I doubt we'll be able to say the same thing about Bristol next week.
No, well, we'll bring you in on your opinion on Bristol because you know it better than me and Lewis in a couple of minutes' time. But we'll first of all have a quick look at the championship order and how that one has mixed it all up. But Lewis did say, or gave us a little bit of a teaser on the top 5. You can see Nicky Taylor is top of the championship. Whether or not he'll be able to join us next week is another thing. A bit of a shame if he doesn't manage it. But getting a train all the way from London after a hard day's work back to Norwich, it's hard enough getting to Norwich in any form of transport at any time, let alone in coming from London on the train. But he's 4 points ahead of Kyle Felvis, and you got Joel Lask in third, also 4 points behind Kyle Felvis. Then you've got Ethan Hill, 2 points behind Joel Lask in fourth. Oliver Gibson rounds out the top 5. Andy and Oliver Gibson actually are joint top 5, both with 30 points. 1 point behind them, Josh Martin, who ended up becoming a bit of a cropper in that particular race, unfortunately. Eric Axelson, who had a late surge but couldn't quite translate it to, he still came in the top 5, so he's better than this first week, but not probably of Eric's standard. He's in 8th place, and Reese Bell rounds out the top 9. All still very close, all a lot to play for as we go into Bristol. And Andy, I'll bring you in one last time. What is the difference between Daytona to Auto Club Speedway and then off to Bristol?
It's a bit like comparing Auto Club to Bristol is a bit like comparing Le Mans to Knock Hill. They are two completely different circuits. Bristol, the best I ever heard it described, it's like racing a 900 horsepower stock car around your living room. It's a tiny little track, half a mile. So Auto Club is 2 miles, just put that into perspective. So this is a quarter the length of Auto Club, probably about a quarter the width. It's also a concrete surface, not tarmac, so that changes the grip levels. Really steep banking as well. It's got the same level of banking roughly as Daytona, so the corner speeds are quite high, but those corners are really, really tight. So it's a proper ring of a circuit. There will be contact, there will be incidents. It's just unavoidable. That's what racing at Bristol is like, and I think it could be about survival of the fittest, really. And those who do stay out of trouble are likely to be the ones at the front come the end.
Oh, wow, I tell you what, that's you've built that up quite well. It's the difference between Le Mans and Knock Hill. Wow, I'm looking forward to it. But I have to say, Oliver Gibson, I can see, is actually already doing practice laps around there. So I'll let you get off, Andy, and try and jump on and maybe show Oliver Gibson how it's done around Bristol as well. But Lewis, a final couple of words from you as well about the evening's, the evening's excitement, shall we say?
I think it delivered exactly what we'd hoped it would deliver. It was difficult to overtake, but people managed it. We got different strategies, and that did make a difference at different points in the race. And we didn't really know who was going to win it up until they took the checkered flag. So I think it really delivered. And I think we touched on it a little bit, but the driving standards improved a lot over Daytona. I think everybody was a lot more comfortable running together than they were at Daytona. And I think although Bristol does seem to warrant incidents from what Andy said and from what I've driven in a very small capacity of it, I think we should hopefully see an improvement on top of this in terms of how comfortable people feel driving on the track together. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Absolutely, yeah. So am I. Right, just very quickly, Lewis, are we doing about what else is going on at VRRC before we say goodnight?
Yes, we absolutely are. So to kick off our championships for the next season, we have the GTV3 Championship. The first championship in a long time that I can remember we've done in GT3 machinery, GTV3 machinery. which will be the GTE cars from the URD mod company. And we've modified it a bit to give our own custom balance of performance, so every car can achieve the same lap time on every one of the tracks. I've tested it myself, and between all 5 cars you can see on track there, they are absolutely identical lap time wise. Any one of them can do the same time, and I think we've had the car choices in, and we've got quite a split between the different cars, so we're also going to see lots of different manufacturers. We've got 7 people have picked the Corvette, 5 people have picked the BMW, 4 people have picked the Porsche, 2 people have picked the Ford, and 2 people have picked the Aston. So you are going to see at least 2 of each of the cars on the screen in those rounds, and we've got some brilliant circuits as well, and they'll all be competing for some pretty awesome prizes. The first place prize being the new direct drive wheel from Camus and 2 wheel rims to go with it, and a nice sizable trophy. Second place, you'll take home a GTF1 race seat, and in third place, you'll take home the 27-inch display from Aegon by AOC, and a nice little trophy as well. In fourth place, you'll take home 2 hours of driver coaching at the new VRRC centre, which is currently under construction. I've seen a fair few photos from Rich of how that's looking, and it's looking really awesome. It's going to be a really cool place for lots of our members to go to have meetups, driving, to do coaching. It's going to be really cool. And in fifth place, you win an hour sim practice at that VRRC centre when that is open. And then we're going to do a prize draw. So if some of the drivers who don't finish in the top 5 have competed in at least 7 of the 8 rounds, they're eligible to be in with a chance of winning one of 2 1-hour sim practice sessions at VRRC. It's a way of rewarding people for participating in a series, and if they haven't quite managed to get the prize, they're still in with a chance of getting one of those. I see Adrian Felvis in the chat is questioning the new VRC centre. Yes, Rich has decided to construct a new route. It's a little barn conversion. I say little, it's quite large actually. But it looks quite small in the pictures. I can't wait to see it in person. But it's going to have all of the sims that were in our Silverstone centre and potentially some more. And it's looking really awesome. I don't know when Rich is hoping to open that. I think he's mentioned a rough date of the end of January, possibly. So we will hope to see that soon. And I'll pass it over to you, Andy, to talk about the time attack. Andy,
Yes.
we'll let Andy do
Or
it.
Jack even.
Yes,
Or Jack.
I'll tell you what, Andy, I don't know if you're actually watching the stream, so I'll tell you what, I'll very quickly do it for you, because you're probably watching back your own race. The time attacks, yes, we've got the Fiat of Bath around Vallelunga. That's currently kicked off. That kicked off 2 days ago on the 9th of January. That's running for 2 weeks before we step it up again. And we're off to, I'm probably going to get this wrong, I always get it wrong, Oschersleben in the Audi TT Cup car. You can tell that we're getting progressively faster through the rounds. That kicks off on the 23rd of January. Round 3, which is on the 6th of February, is around everybody's favourite British circuit, Alton Park. Around the Island circuit, which is more the British touring car style circuit rather than the GT one, with a lovely sharp hairpin halfway through the back straight. That's at a mini JCW, so you'll be quite often reenacting, hopefully not the crashes that we see on the British Touring Car Championship, but quite often some of the races that we see around the mini JCW. And on the 20th of February, our final round of the front-wheel drive time attack, as we're sort of lovingly calling it, is the Valencia Street Circuit in the Cupra TCR car. The Cupra is probably very well known to everybody at VRRC by now, but it isn't going to be the hybrid version. It's just the standard TCR car, which in and of itself is a fantastic mod and a fantastic car to get around any circuit, but particularly the Valencia Street Circuit. So that is the first of many time attacks that we've got planned for 2023. We've got a whole calendar of them, and as we'll reveal them, obviously, as we get into round 4 of each of them. So yeah, running for 2 weeks, Fiat Abarth, currently around Vallelunga. Right, I think that is about all we've got time for here tonight. We spent a long time chatting, but to be honest, Nascar really is a very interesting concept to those uninitiated, which I include myself in that group. So it has been absolutely brilliant to have the knowledge of the likes of Andy McEwan and the other drivers come in to have a chat to us throughout the evening. But a big thank you to Lewis Edwards for doing the broadcasting and commentating. A big thank you to Andy McEwan for doing the driving and commentating. It makes me just doing the commentary a very easy job indeed, but a very enjoyable one. It's been a brilliant time being your host this evening, and we'll be back next week for Bristol for more VRRC NASCAR.
Woo!